theme of the day is authenticity in an artificial world. I'm sure many of us know exactly what that means when we hear that. And on some level, we're not really totally sure what that means. But I suspect when we see something like authenticity in an artificial world, we probably recognize that we have a desire for something like that. And we probably can recognize that there is a tremendous need for something like that. And so that's really what we're going to talk about here this evening. And another way to say that is trying to uh, use some Buddhist thought in this. So that would be about trying to cultivate a new middle way. Because as I'm sure you've imagined or have noticed, we're not getting rid of the artificial world. We live in a large world that's artificial, and I don't think there's any way to be free from that. So I think it's more, how do we embrace that? How do we find a middle way with recognizing that this is probably the way it's going to be for quite some time, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. So I also don't want to create a binary. The last thing we need is more binaries. Is that being authentic is good, and caught up in artificial things is bad, and we want to be authentic and not artificial. We really have to come to terms with these realities and find a middle way as individuals, so that way we feel like we can move through the world in a way with some degree of presence and ease and stability of mind. As is usually not the case, it's nice to be with you. I don't know any of you. Usually, my Zoom programs are for my cohorts in different classes. I usually know everybody or most people. So I always feel like it's important to say a few words about who I am and what I do and why I'm here today. Um, I live in Colorado. I live about 6 hours west of Drala, although I will be on site there in April, and I've been there before. I love the place. I'm 51 years old. I live in rural Colorado. I have two children, a 7 and 13-year-old boy and a wife. And we live out here in a small town called Paonia, and very happy to be out here. Um, which means at 51 years old, that puts me in sort of the Gen X world. I'm a classic Gen Xer. I was born in 1974. I grew up north of Boston. I grew up in a very John Hughes, 80s movies, uh, punk rock, anti-establishment. John Bender from Breakfast Club was my hero growing up. So I very much come from that cultural background, which I think is actually relevant. Um, I'm also considered a second generation insight teacher. So those of you who are familiar with insight meditation or Vipassana meditation, people like Jack Kornfield and Joseph Goldstein and Sharon Salzberg and Tara Brach, that world of meditation that's been going on for 50 years, now probably more popularly known as what we would call the mindfulness revolution. So I'm a second generation teacher in that tradition, and I will talk about that some, but the practice of mindfulness I think is essential to navigating the insanity of the modern world. I'm also I've done a lot of work both personally and professionally in the addiction trauma world. I've been sober for 21 years, recovering drug addict and alcoholic, also a survivor of complex trauma. I lived probably, you know, a good majority of my adult life with fairly clinical grade symptoms of PTSD, um, and have really kind of really gotten all of that in a place that I'm pretty happy with, and mostly using these practices to do so. And I also work professionally in addiction spaces and trauma spaces, um, and that's a tough space to work, because it's getting worse, not better. And people, as you probably know, are a lot of people are just having a really hard time right now. It's not an easy time for many people to be alive for a variety of reasons. And part of my wanting to be here tonight was to try to offer some perspective and some practices on how to how to work with experiences, especially when things are hard, if you're struggling or those people in your life are having a hard time with all that. Um, Culturally, I was also a big part of the Against the Stream Meditation Society. That was where I was empowered to teach, and worked a long time with Noah Levine and Vinnie Ferraro and the Dharma Punks movement. Some of you might know Josh Corda in New York. Um, I also teach. I'm also a teacher, a trainer in a program that nobody knows about, which is the best program ever, called Cultivating Emotional Balance, which is a program that was developed in the year 2000 by the Dalai Lama and developed by a bunch of Western psychologists and Buddhist meditators that integrates the science of emotion with the contemplative practices of the Buddhist tradition. Um, so, I wear a lot of hats. I do a lot of things. I also want to say I'm totally uneducated. I've never been to college. I'm a high school dropout. Um, I don't have any worldly credentials. I've just been working in this space for a very long time. I spent most of my professional training in juvenile detention programs and in prison for women, prison for men, eating disorder clinics, drug addiction clinics. So I was trained by the best. Um, I was definitely trained by the best. If you can teach meditation to traumatized American teenagers, you can basically do anything. So I bow down to the young folks out there who helped give me proper training. So that's kind of who I am, where I'm coming from, and so that's a lot of different things. So the teaching tonight is authenticity in an artificial world, but I do need to give you a little bit of a backdrop of why I think this is so important and why it's so relevant, because there's really been three primary teaching models that I've been using in 2025. Largely making a plug for my man, John Vervaeke. If you're not familiar with John Vervaeke, you should get this book. He's got podcasts. It's a book he called Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. It's probably the most important book. I'll put it in the chat. Um, and John Vervaeke is a teacher in Toronto who teaches Buddhist meditation and cognitive science and philosophy. And his assessment, and I think that we can all see, is that what's going on right now for humanity, I think more so in modernity, in Western culture, but also worldwide, is just a tremendous meaning crisis. People are undergoing a radical crisis of meaning, especially young people in the United States, where people look at the world and they just look at the world and they think about the world and they look at the future and they just think, what, there's just nothing in this for me. I'm never going to have a family. I'm never going to have a job. I'm never going to be able to afford a house. I'm never going to be able to have a life anywhere near the life that my parents had. And the addiction to the cell phones and polarization, people are really the primary mental health crisis, whether it's trauma or addiction or depression or whatever you want to call it. What drives the engine that's driving the mental health crisis is actually a meaning crisis. No sense of meaning. What's this life for? And this is really, I think, the spiritual pandemic of our times. You thought COVID was bad? Well, this is going to be much worse. This is a very deep-seated spiritual, deep part of our humanity. Um, and also, there's hope. I don't want to be all doom and gloomy. I think there's actually more hope than you can imagine. So with that, so I've done a lot of work on the meaning crisis, which is the backdrop, and I have another program I'm going to offer through Drawla Mountain. You should sign up for it. It's another online program that's free. That's another segment of the work that I do called Mindfulness in the Addiction Economy. And so these three components is really what's going to drive the conversation this evening. So this idea that humanity is undergoing a crisis of meaning, and what's fueling that, the engine that's driving that in the artificial space and the digital space is the addiction economy that we live in. And all of this is for me to make an argument as to why authenticity is so important. And I'll spend most of the evening talking about that. But I do feel it's important to give you the backdrop into this. And to maybe square up the four corners of the meaning crisis. And I hope these are all things that I'm talking about are things that you're unfortunately probably very aware of. If you live in the world like I do and you're paying any degree of attention, this stuff is obvious. There's really four interconnected components that really drive the meaning crisis. And the first one is our glorification and addiction to busyness. Busy, 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 busy. Um, Too many things to do, not enough of time, not enough energy, not enough of money, and that actually we glorify busyness. Success is measured in the amount of busyness that we have. That a lot of times people, when they look at their calendar and they have a free day or a free afternoon, their first impulse is to fill it up. How you doing? Good. Oh, busy, busy. Oh yeah, so busy. So we've glorified busyness to the point where people are working 80 hours a week. If you have a 40-hour a week job in America, you're working part-time at this point. There's actually an article I read during the pandemic that pointed to this phenomenon. It was called the 25th hour. And the premise of the article was that corporate America is coming for your 25th hour. And the joke there, of course, being there's only 24 hours in the day and they want your 25th hour now. I mean, how many of you check work emails at 10 p.m. at night? How many of you do work related things on the nights and the weekends? Maybe because you feel like you have to or you need to. It's totally super unhealthy. So this glorification of busyness, which leads to the experience of burnout. People are fried. People are toast. They're overworked, they're stressed out at work. They come home, they're working too much, they don't have enough money to afford their things, and we're just kind of burned out. We're tired, we're exhausted, and what do we do when we're burned out and tired, exhausted? We absorb and we consume digital trash through the phone, and we eat trash food. We eat ultra processed food that has zero nutrition. We eat carbs, we eat sugar, we eat garbage, we consume garbage, which actually makes us feel more burned out. Right. So it's just like ultra processed information on top of ultra processed food, feeling totally burned out by that. Um, and I'm guilty as charged. I'm not talking about, I'm also talking about myself. This is the stuff I deal with every day, just as much as anybody else. And there's only one way to say it. The other thing that's really, I think, the key contributor to the meaning crisis is the amount of bullshit that we consume in our society. Everybody with an Instagram account has lose 40 pounds in 5 minutes and drink this powder and get this Chicava powder and get this powder and eat this gummy and take this ketamine and do this thing. And we have this thing for you, this product, this thing in 5 minutes. You're going to feel better. You'll never feel bad again. You're going to lose weight. You're going to be super healthy. You're going to do the kettlebell challenge and lose 50 pounds before the sun goes down. All of our information, all of our self help, all of our news, all of the information that we consume online is all total bullshit. And we know it. It's so hard. We're like swimming in it. I don't know if you remember George Carlin, one of the great comics. Interestingly enough, George Carlin was way ahead of his time. His final HBO special, the last special he did before he died, was called "It's Bullshit and It's Bad for You." And so we don't know who to trust. We don't know who to believe. We're so polarized. We're divided. I get information all the time. All this, you probably see it in your feeds. New study indicates, people who get, 14 hours of sleep live 3 years longer than everybody else. It's just all data information. I'm sure that's not all bullshit, but you know what? Good luck trying to sort it all out. I know that I kind of have given up. I call them the four B's. The fourth one that really, again, they're all super relevant and they're all interrelated, is that we feel betrayed by the institutions that we thought were supposed to protect us. We feel betrayed by the medical institutions. We feel betrayed by the health institutions. We feel betrayed by the educational institutions. We feel betrayed by the government. Not everybody does, but I think that's really where we get all of these things that contribute to the meaning crisis. The way that I experience is it just makes me really cynical. It's really hard not to just get cynical. It's like, you know what? You know, it's like, what are you going to do? It's like, we just all want to throw up our hands and give up. And what does that mean? Well, that means I just eat more ultra processed food and look at my phone. It's like, yeah, I'm addicted to my phone. I don't even care anymore. It's like we've kind of given in, we've given up because we're fighting against these massive systems that are just so difficult to overcome. And so all of this is like, yeah, I suspect you all know what I'm talking about, right? Like I'm not, this is what we're dealing with, right? And this is like, so part of it is like there's two things that can happen is we can collapse underneath it and feel disempowered and feel like what's the point? Or we can like maybe get in touch with some constructive anger, or we can be like, you know what, like I don't accept this. I'm not. Uh, I'm looking for another way out. I'm looking for a way of looking at the world with a degree of positivity. And there's much evidence to suggest we should be hopeful than we should be hopeless. It's just that that's not what's coming in your news feed. And that again, that plays a little bit into this addiction economy. Now, because I've worked in all these different spaces, I have access to lots of different content that I find to be helpful. And I've done a lot of work in Silicon Valley, working with corporate people in the emotional intelligence world. And one of the terms that they used to use in Silicon Valley about 15 years ago, you might have heard of it. It's called the attention economy. Now, this is going to sound pretty evil, but it's very important that we understand this. The attention economy is this. The attention economy is okay, we have 350 million people in the United States times 24 hours a day times 1440 minutes a day. And what happens is you figure out how many minds there are, how many moments there are every day, and you get this gigantic number in the billions. And you say, okay, let's just say there's 500 billion units of moments of attention. And what we need to do is we need to get as many of those as possible. That's the attention economy. How many moments of collective attention is there in the culture? And how do we as an organization create an algorithm where we get as much as people's attention as possible? Right. So what do? They invented these algorithms, progressive analytics, and their goal is when you're scrolling through Facebook or Instagram, there's $1 billion worth of product on the other side of that screen whose job is to show you the next image that's going to keep you engaged. Engagement is just a polite way to say addiction, right? And so, and then what they do is they say, we have this much of people's attention, which means you can sell shoes and vests and backpacks and gummies and powders. And that it's all about money. It's all about attention. If you haven't seen what's it called? The Social Dilemma. The Social Dilemma. It's a Netflix documentary made by my friend Tristan Harris from the Center for Humane Technology. It came out years ago. It's unbelievable. He's big on this. There's a whole movement of people who are trying to undermine this. And they say in Silicon Valley, if the product is free, you are the product. So every app that you download that you don't pay for, the reason why you don't pay for it is somebody else is paying for it, and they're paying for your attention. So if the product is free, you are the product. Okay. Now, again, I'm addicted to my phone too. I'm not preaching. I'm with you. I'm in this as much as you are. Um, if the product is free, you are the product. And so that was the attention economy. The attention economy is over now, and we lost. And now we live in the addiction economy. Right? We're addicted to trash food. We're addicted to our devices. And again, like I want to take the pejorative out of addiction. It's not a moral failure. It's not your fault. It's not necessarily evil. It's not any of those things. It's just the reality of reality. And what we need to do as individuals is just to try to like wake up to this, as Vervaeke says, waking up to the meaning crisis, being like, okay, like, all right, y'all, this is the water we're swimming in now, you know? And to get to mindfulness, which I'll get to now, is why I think, mindfulness is, I'm sure you all know, everywhere now. Now, this is where Buddhism and mindfulness, first of all, is a Buddhist meditation practice. It's kind of the original one. Every form of Buddhist meditation across the many traditions, the Theravada, the Mahayana, the Vajrayana, every form, even secular mindfulness, Buddhist meditation, all of it is an anti-addiction cognitive exercise. What do we do in Buddhist meditation? We sit, we come into our body, we breathe, we bring our attention into the present moment. And what do? We notice the mind wander, right? We notice the mind worry about the past, plan about the future. We recognize that. And what do? We take that attention and we take it back. Your most valuable resource that you possess as a human being is your ability to pay attention. And so there you go. There's your power. There's your autonomy. Taking your attention back, right? And just in training the mind to be more attentive, to be more easeful. So really, the news is in our favor. We can actually do something about this. But the thing about it is you have to be an active participant in it. Because the addiction is our attention is vulnerable to being hijacked. And like they have billions of dollars of digital garbage and electronics that are they have like trigonometry level shit to hijack your attention. But as soon as you recognize your attention is caught up, you can just bring it back to the breath. This is Jedi mind trick shit, folks. This is not some woo-woo little thing to take for granted. Mindfulness, meditation, Buddhist meditation, mind training is really the number one thing that we could develop right now that would actually um, totally depower this entire reality, right? So we should feel as individuals some degree of like, okay, like I see what's going on here, but you know what? Like, this is the water we're swimming in, but someone just threw me a raft. Okay, we can get somewhere around this. Now, okay, it was a little longer than I wanted to. Let me get into this. So let's talk about authenticity. Why is that important? Authenticity is an interesting word because, from an academic point of view, authenticity is considered a virtue of modernity. Okay. You don't see the word authenticity in Buddhist texts or old Christian texts, none, or even the Quran, or no religious literature talks about the word authenticity. So it's a virtue of modernity, meaning that as a concept, it's actually not that old. It's relatively new. It's a virtue of modernity. It's also a cultural virtue. It's societal. It's relational. Now, all of us probably would, if I went around and had everybody give their definition of authenticity, probably myself included, it's a really hard word to define. But when we see it, we know it. When we meet another person, or maybe we see somebody give a TED talk, or we listen to a Dharma talk, or we listen to a podcast, right? We listen to people talk all the time now, which is actually, I think, great. Nobody saw the podcast thing coming, and I think the podcast world might save the world, actually. Is because when we listen to people talk on, say, like a podcast, and they're having an honest, respectful dialogue about something, when people are being authentic, we know that they are, and we like it, don't you? We're drawn towards authenticity. And so that's really a good metric for us to realize. There's something about it. We have an appetite for it. We respect it. We understand it. We know that it's important, right? We know that we probably on some level would like to be more authentic. Now, how you do that, it's complicated, and I'll try to walk you through that here this evening. Um, but it's a cultural virtue that we've kind of collectively, implicitly as a society, have decided that, like, we want to support authentic people in the culture, and we sort of do. What do? We subscribe to their stuff, we buy their records, we watch their movies, we do support people who, even and this happens in, certain people in movies in Hollywood. Some of them are authentic, some of them are not. Music, like, it's a very cultural thing. Like, if you think about your favorite music artist, why are they your favorite music artist? Maybe you just kind of like their music. But I would argue that reason you like their music is because you feel like connected to their lyrics. You feel connected to their songs and their message, and you are recognizing a degree of authenticity about what they're saying, and you feel connected to that. It's just such a beautiful thing. So important that we have this. Um, So I do want to do some meditation practice because I always feel like it's irresponsible to talk about meditation without doing some. And so when I talk about authenticity, and this is just me talking right now. I'm not an expert on this. There's no book about this. This is like, there's actually not much said or written about authenticity, but I think about this stuff all the time, and I spent the last couple of years really exploring it. So I kind of have three areas of our lives that we can develop that really, I think, support authenticity. And the first one is self-awareness. Self-awareness. Another way to say self-awareness is mindfulness. Yet another way to say that mindfulness is insight, which is insight meditation or Vipassana meditation. Insight is being able to um, be honest with ourselves. If you don't have some degree of self-awareness, if you don't understand yourself a little bit at least, then authenticity is sort of off the table, right? Because one of the ways in which authenticity protects itself is it can't be mimicked. You can't mimic it. You can't mimic it. In fact, if you see somebody attempt to mimic authenticity, you know immediately that they're inauthentic. You smell it right away, don't you? You're like, oh, this person's full of shit. You just know immediately. right? So it's such a beautiful thing that the human heart is like attuned towards it. We know it when we see it, and when we see it being mimicked or somebody trying to uh, be authentic in a way that maybe they're trying to mimic somebody else or model somebody else, we know it immediately. It's like such a it's a very interesting radar, a social radar that we all that we all have to some degree, one that you can pay attention to. And so with that, so mindfulness, insight, we'll do maybe about 12 minutes of practice here in just a second. Um, Another thing I talk about that I've mentioned tonight is we are in the midst of what's called the mindfulness revolution. About 14 years ago, the cover of Time magazine said the mindfulness revolution, and it's made its way into education and psychotherapy, and mindfulness is everywhere, right? It's a really great thing. Mostly, it's everywhere because it works, and so it's the ability to just um, observe the inner workings of one's mind as it arises and passes away in real time, to see a thought as a thought, a memory as a memory, to have to understand emotion of sadness moving through the body, fear, anger. It's to thine own self be true. It's about self awareness, and really, I would argue that without some degree of mindfulness, self awareness is more or less off of the table. Um, And then there's really two qualities. One gets highlighted, one does not, and that's unfortunate. The main quality of mindfulness that gets highlighted is the observation power of the mind, the ability to observe experience happening in real time. To be present, we say that, right? To be present, to be grounded. I want to be more grounded. I want to be more present. Now, to be grounded and to be present, what does that require? Well, it requires attention. Right? So attention is everything. But there's also another feature to it. It's not just about being present, it's also about being at ease. It's about being non reactive, about being open, about being spacious, about meeting oneself with some degree of kindness, of friendliness, which is the more important quality in mindfulness, I think, and also the harder one, and the one that's not emphasized so much. So I'll kind of walk you through that here tonight. This evening, we'll do about maybe 12 minutes of practice so you can get a sense of that. So you can find a comfortable way to sit. You're in the luxury of your own home, so you can just kind of adjust a little bit, maybe to a more upright posture. And I will start and end with the bell. All right, thank you. And also, for those of you who are there, if you would be so kind, if you are able to turn your camera on, I'd appreciate that. It's always better to see your face than your name. Um, so thank you for that. Um, So yeah, so I'm sure many of you have done this kind of practice before, but that was sort of a preliminary mindfulness practice, something that if you did that 15 or 20 minutes a day, 5 days a week, would you know have tremendous benefits. Um, so cool. So let's talk more about this. So kind of giving you the big setting of the table with the meaning crisis and the addiction economy and all that stuff that you're all familiar with. The question is, well, what do we do? And I think as individuals, what we really need to do is focus on ourselves. Um, and I think that's really important right now. I remember years ago the Dalai Lama was interviewed about, like, how do we, from a Buddhist perspective, how do we deal with these huge problems in the world, racism and sexism and climate change and all of the stuff that goes on. And he said, well, it's really one person at a time. Um, Big change. It's hard to change big systems. It's not so difficult to change the individual. And really the first individual that we want to start with is ourselves. And so this really, this first domain or pillar, whatever you want to call it, of authenticity is really about self-awareness, which is also one of the emotional intelligence competencies in Dan Goleman's work. Self-awareness, mindfulness, insight. It's about, coming to know ourselves in a deeper way, which that can be acquired through many different venues. People come to understand themselves a lot in the recovery world, people who are part of 12-step programs. People go to therapy now. Many people go to therapy now. It's very common. Mostly the therapeutic process is having a conversation with somebody about your experience, and you get to gain insight around that, and there's value in that. Of course, my bias is, as a Buddhist meditation teacher, that as far as looking back in antiquity, no group of people have dedicated more time to understanding the mind than the Buddhists. They really they've been staring at the mind for 2,500 years, and I would have to say they've sort of figured it out. And so we can use their methodologies to develop what we might just call a contemplative practice. And the world is rich over with different contemplative practices. So there's lots of things that we can do to gain self-awareness. Mindfulness is probably the most secular, obvious, low-hanging fruit, because mindfulness as a practice actually doesn't require at all that you adhere to any religious system of thought at all. It's just a practice. It's like it'd be like trying to say that, like, going to the gym and doing fitness is like Christian, like that would be crazy, right? You would never do that. It's just meditation is just mental fitness. And so having something like a practice like mindfulness, if you studied this in a college or a university, they would be called contemplative practices. So people go to church for part of their contemplative practice. They engage in community. They engage in self-reflection. But the reason why I think mindfulness is so important is that, first of all, it doesn't require you don't need anything to do it. And also, I will say, if you spend 20 minutes in the morning doing some mindfulness practice, that's 20 minutes you won't be on your phone. And in and of itself, that'll probably do you some good. Just not looking at the phone is like a contemplative practice. So we do it. And so when we, another way to say that, a way to say that kind of points to how hard it is, actually, because I want to make a play for that. This is not easy work, is that one of the ways that mindfulness is described is as of a mirror. Like mindfulness is like a mirror. Now, if I take a mirror and I hold a mirror up, whatever I put in front of the mirror reflects that object back exactly as it appears. It doesn't have bias. It doesn't bend. It doesn't manipulate. It doesn't rationalize. It doesn't justify. It just says pen, striker. It reflects the object back. And when we practice mindfulness internally, things come up in the mind. We have regrets. We have old traumas. We have disappointments. We have fears, we have anxieties, we have disappointments. That when we practice something like mindfulness, a lot of times we get in contact with a lot of stuff that we don't really actually want to deal with. We don't want to feel it. There are things about ourselves that we don't actually want to know about. We call this in the addiction world denial. Buddhism, they call it ignorance. So, having a contemplative practice is hard work because it puts us in a position where we have to confront things that we maybe don't want to confront. And of course, the problem with all that is if you don't want to confront hard things, then you can go to the refrigerator or you can pick up your phone. You can distract yourself from that. The word that they use in psychology, some of you probably know this word, called cognitive dissonance. When the mind is confronted by two seemingly opposing ideas, it creates psychological discomfort. Like for me, being in recovery and working with drug addiction, I'm always working with addiction on some level. It's like, I'm 51 years old. I've been overweight for 20 years. I know exactly what I need to do. I know exactly how I need to move and when I need to eat. And, and I had varying degrees. I still struggle with it, to this day. And it's like that idea. It's like, I really want to be healthy and I really want to exercise and I want to go for a walk today and I want to lose some weight and I really want to eat a pint of ice cream. Do you know what I mean? Both of those are true. And, the ice cream wins out some of the time and not every time. So, it's a practice. It's like you're not going to get it right. You're not going to make a policy with yourself. But this is the kind of work that we really, really want to be able to do. Like I've gotten in the habit of taking a walk and leaving my phone in the truck. And the first time I did it, it was excruciating. I was like, I'm going to go for a 20-minute walk I'm like, I can't be without my phone without 20 minutes. I'm like, really? Why? Like, what are you worried about? So there's these little things that we can do because we want to be able to, part of authenticity really is about facing the internal struggle, facing the internal conflict, doing the work, as they say in therapy or being in recovery. People who have been in recovery, we all have work to do. We know that we have work to do. And I don't know about you, but when I have work to do and I know I'm not doing it, it's actually worse than doing the work. You ever been in that mind space? There's something you know you need to do. You totally know you're not doing it. You feel like double shit. It sucks. And so, we have to take that on and a practice. So this self-awareness pillar is, I think, super important and very crucial to the whole project of authenticity. And I would say without some degree of self-awareness, authenticity is basically sort of off the table. It's not going to happen. The other thing that I'll make a play for, hard to describe in terms of, is something that I would simply call ethical intelligence. And I think this is just sort of my opinion, but there's a lot of academic research that would back it up as well. Like, you can't be a bad person and be authentic. You can't, I think authenticity is about kindness. I think one of the reasons we're drawn to people who are authentic, people that you've met in your life that are really kind and friendly. Don't you feel attracted to those kind of people? When somebody displays or demonstrates a level of kindness and benevolence and generosity, we're immediately drawn to those kinds of people. We just are. We feel an openness to them. So there's a sense of ethical intelligence. Another way we might be able to say that would be integrity. Do we have integrity? Another way to say that on a more subjective level would be alignment, or what they would call in the emotional intelligence world, cognitive balance. And cognitive balance is, I have my views and I have my behaviors. How aligned am I? Right? And this isn't about thou shalt not. This is not 10 commandments. This is not 5 precepts. This is all about your values. Like, I value honesty. How honest am I? Am I always honest? I'm not always anything, right? Let's be honest, right? But what that is that means that's the metric of like, these are my values. And if you got to know me over a period of time, people who know you, they know your values because they see how you demonstrate them. It might be something like honesty. It might be empathy. It might be loyalty. It might be generosity. There's lots of different. I bet if we went around here and if we had time, and I bet you there's all values that all of us share. And I'm sure that there's some values that are more important to me that might not be as important to you. But we do have to have, part of self-awareness is being aware of what's important to me on an ethical value level. I don't want to use the word morality because that's where it starts to get into the weeds. And how much do I live in line with those things? Now, I'll be honest, when I suffer in my life, the thing that I suffer most about is when I actually betray one of my values or one of my boundaries. I do or say something that I regret later. I make some offhanded comment to my wife, or I'm a little bit maybe mean or short with my boys, and it's like, they're trying to get their shoes and their mittens and their snow pants on time to drop them off at school on time, and maybe being a little bit curt or a little bit short, and then I ride home and I feel bad. I'm like, I could have been more patient with them. They were having a hard time this morning. It took them 2 minutes instead of 1 minute to put their boots on. Nobody got killed. They weren't late for school. Everything was fine. I just overreacted there. And I feel bad about that. I regret that because in the moment I was unable to have that degree of patience or kindness that I would like to demonstrate. And again, we don't want to beat ourselves up for this, but this is part of the self awareness of like, how am I attuned to my own moral compass, my sense of integrity, living in alignment, and that self awareness and that sense of integrity. Really, really are huge components of authenticity. And again, uh, it's a lot easier to detect it in somebody else than it is in yourself. So part of this, I think, I wouldn't put this in there, but I'll put it in there now. It's like we do have to also have authentic relationships with other people. We don't need to have a ton of people, but if you, and I would imagine most of you probably do, hopefully, if you have two or three people in your life that you can sit down with and have a real meaningful conversation, you're really lucky, you know? And hopefully that's not the person you have to pay $250 an hour with to talk to once a week, you know? And so we can practice this, right? We can practice this. So authenticity, I would also say, as many things, is also a practice. Authenticity is not something that you either have or that you don't have, right? It's not that simple. It's not like either you're an authentic person or you're inauthentic. It's just it's a range. Like sometimes you are, right? Sometimes I feel like when I'm with other people and I'm living my life, I feel like I'm aware of myself. I'm in tune with my sense of integrity. I'm living in alignment with my values, and I'm living in a way that feels authentic and true. And that always feels good, right? And sometimes, not so much. So again, it's not this binary black and white, like either you're an authentic person or you're inauthentic. It's just like trying to pay a little bit more attention to it. And from the first person user's experience for all of you is to just kind of get a sense of what it's like for you. And again, I think the metric that I always use is like I'll try to notice moments in my life where I feel like it's happening, and it always feels good. It feels important. It feels meaningful. It feels right, for lack of a better word. It just feels right, right? It doesn't mean it doesn't always feel like pleasant though, right? Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes there's conflict, right? Sometimes it's not easy. It's challenging. The third one I'll talk about, I try to talk about them in sequence because they get more complicated. This one I don't really have a word for, but I can kind of unpack it to some degree because it's not something that we talk about. It's what John Vervaeke calls relevance realization. It's a cognitive science term, which I know sounds fancy, but I'll try to break it down for you. It's really about actually desire. Um, it's about what we want for ourselves. And this is where it gets tricky because desire is a word that gets pathologized. Like in the Buddhist tradition, sometimes it gets pathologized because it gets lumped in with craving and attachment. And some people think the goal of Buddhist practice is to just not want anything at all. We should just have no preferences and we should just not want anything at all, which is super destructive. We also don't want to be greedy. Um, Desire in philosophical terms is interesting because desire is something that they say is both obvious and completely and totally mysterious. Like when I want something, I basically know what I want. You know what I mean? I go into Target, I know what I want. I get it. I go home. It's not complicated, right? I go to a restaurant, I look at the menu, I know what I want. I get it. So there's a way in which we could break it down. There's like superficial desires, right? Like we go to the Target, we know what we want, we know what we need. We go to the city market, we go to the grocery store, and we know the items that we want, and we get them. It's really no big deal. But on a deeper level, like what do we really want? How do we want to be in this world? Is a deeply philosophical question. Now, for years and years, I had kind of avoided philosophy because I always thought it was a kind of arcane discipline. But I've really come around the last couple of years. Like, whether you like it or not, human beings are deeply philosophical creatures. And in fact, even if you say you're not a philosophical person, that's a philosophical statement. Like, there's no getting out of it. And so part of it is to spend the time of like, okay, like what do I really want for myself in this world? Um, Another way to say that would be, what is my desire template? You know, do I want to have children or not? Do I want to have a partner or not? Uh, what kind of a career do I want? How much money do I need? Where do I want to live? Um, and the problem with this is where the artificial thing gets complicated, is your phone, your social media newsfeed will tell you what to do. It'll tell you what to like. It'll tell you what to buy. It'll tell you where to live. The world, society at large, your parents, your culture, your school, the world will tell you exactly how you're supposed to be if you let it. And this is where a lot of people get confused. This is where, I got confused growing up. We all get confused growing up. It's what Carl Jung, the great thinker of modern times, calls individuation. We go through these existential kind of crises. In fact, the other thing, just on a kind of interesting point of view about authenticity, the first school of philosophical thought that actually started talking about authenticity as being important was the existentialists. Albert Camus, Jean-Paul Sartre, Heidegger, existential philosophy, this very unknown and not so respected, surprisingly, school of philosophy that arose out of post-World War II, after, Europe was decimated after World War II, and all the cynicism and all the kind of, that's where we get the God is dead stuff. They're like, if people can perform these atrocities, if there was ever a God, he's gone now. And there's this movement called the existentialists that really kind of very interesting study, school of thought. If you ever read The Stranger when you were in high school, that's like a classic novel. But talking about this authenticity, these crises, these existential crises that we go to, like, how do I want to be in this world? When you go into the grocery store, getting the items that you want, that you desire, is very different than sitting quietly in the morning drinking your coffee, or after having a hard day, just, and I'm sure you've been there in your mind where you're like, what am I doing? What am I doing? Why am I doing it? And so this is really, I think, where all the good stuff is. All the good stuff is. Everything you're looking for lies in that deep questioning of inner conflict. And I think that that's the hallmark of the human experience, is that we feel conflicted about a lot of things. We're confused. I'm confused. What do I want to be? Where do I want to go? How do I want to be in this world? What's important to me? And Vervaeke summed this up as relevance realization. And realization is kind of the feature of, again, the axial revolution that we've been in since the last 2,500 years, when we went from hunters and gatherers, when human life was all just about sustaining life, to the modern world where we actually have the comfort and the luxury of sitting around and thinking about this kind of shit. Is to realize, is to be, first of all, is to be aware of. To realize something means that you've become aware of it. That's half of it, to realize. And the other half of it is to make it real, to do it. And so that's that part of that realization. Sometimes the Buddhist tradition, a lot of mystical traditions talk about realization. But in a practical sense, it's really basic. It's like, am I aware of the things that I want for myself? And am I doing the work and taking the steps and making the actions to make those things real? Which is very scary and very vulnerable, and I would actually even say almost revolutionary and very countercultural, right? And so, and then the relevance is again, understanding for yourself what is relevant to your sense of well-being and happiness. Do you know what those things are? And this also, too, all of this that I'm talking about, this third domain, is really all the building blocks of what makes things meaningful. We want to have, I think at the end of the day, we all, of course we all want to be happy, right? But I think that's too superficial. We actually, I think if we're really pressed, what we want is we want to have a meaningful life. We want our life to matter. We want our time on earth to matter. And it doesn't have to matter in the epic sense. I matter to my parents. I matter to my kids. I matter to my students. You know, I matter to people. I'm relevant. What's relevant to my sense of well-being and purpose? And the thing that's so interesting, the thing that breaks my heart every day is how much I give my attention to things that are not relevant to my sense of well-being and happiness. Like I do this little trick when I'm on my phone. I'm like, for what purpose am I looking at this right now? Nothing good, nothing meaningful is ever going to happen to you on a screen, I promise you. Nothing. Now, if you want to buy plane tickets or pay the mortgage or pay your electric bill, then yeah, the screen's pretty fucking handy, right? Like, again, we're not trying to demonize it. I'm not trying to demonize it. It has its role, it has its purpose. But can you put it down and take a walk in the woods for an hour? You know? When I'm at like lunch with a friend or if I'm at lunch with my wife and she gets up to use the restroom, can I sit there for 7 minutes or do I have to pick up my phone? If I'm about to eat with somebody, as soon as they leave the table, how long does it before I pick up my phone? 8 seconds, maybe? Check my email. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, again, it's just like, it's so addictive. And so, we use this word wisdom in wisdom traditions, Buddhist traditions. We talk about wisdom. But for me, and Vervaeke argues, which I think is great, is the cultivation of wisdom is the cultivation of meaning. And that means as individuals, right, we've done this work. We have some degree of self-awareness. We have some ethical intelligence. We know what's important to us. And we know what's relevant to our sense of purpose and meaning. And we know what those things are, and we participate in those things actively, daily, as much as possible, on purpose, in a meaningful way. So again, these are all skills, right? This is just skills. Even Richie Davidson talks about, happiness is a skill. And so this cultivation of meaning. Everything I'm talking about tonight is really all strategies and components to how do we identify this crisis of meaning and how do we find a way out of it. And it doesn't mean we have to shave our heads and put on brown robes or go outside and run your iPhone over with your car 15 times. That's no good either, actually. It's trying to find a middle way. How do we embrace this stuff? And really focus on ourselves. And I don't know about you, but I've always had a kind of, the word happiness makes me cringe a little bit. I always thought the word happiness was suspect. So I've tried to call it genuine happiness and authentic happiness. And now I just call it authentic living. And authentic living and having a meaningful life. It doesn't mean that I always get what I want. It doesn't mean that everything goes my way. It doesn't mean that it's all pleasure and no pain. It means quite the opposite. In fact, some of you are probably familiar with one of the people in our society who's done a lot of work on this is Brene Brown. She has done a lot. She's written. I see she has a new book out. She's totally kick ass. I remember watching her vulnerability TED talk 15 years ago, and now she's huge. She's everywhere because she's totally great, right? Who doesn't love Brene Brown? But she did all this. She's a qualitative researcher, so she studies stories, kind of. And I think they've interviewed over 100,000 people now, and they just ask you a series of very basic questions. One of the basic questions is, tell me a story about something in your life that's meaningful, or something that you went through that was meaningful. And not always, but by and large, and most of the time, when somebody tells a story about something that happened to them or something that they went through that was very meaningful, it's something that they went through that was deeply painful. The story of meaning is often the story of tragedy. So people who live and engage in meaningful lives, they don't talk about themselves being happy or getting what they want, or things being easy. Those things actually become irrelevant. People who are really, really feel like they're living meaningful lives, if you ask them the question, are you happy? They actually don't even know what you mean. They're like, am I happy? They're like, I don't know. I don't really think about that anymore. I'm kind of over that. Right? Because the metric we use is happiness is about I get what I want and I avoid what I don't want. It's okay, well, good luck with that. And so it's how we transform the difficult things that we go through. Right? And then when you look at, and I'll take some questions here a little bit because I know I'm giving you a lot, and I definitely want to hear from you all. But when I was doing my training and my empowerment to get trained in cultivating emotional balance, we did a lot of happiness research, which I always thought would be a cool job. If I could go back and do it again, I think I would go back to school and become a happiness researcher. Imagine if that was your job every day. You went to the laboratory and just studied happiness. But they talk about kind of three templates, three pillars of happiness. The first one is contentment. And so I think that's where meditation practice and mindfulness and Buddhist meditation practice is so helpful, is that it's to be content. And being content isn't getting what you want, it's wanting what you have. It's wanting the things that you already have and enjoying and having a sense of gratitude for those things. Contentment is super important. And if you think about it too, back to the artificial and the algorithms, just to make a plug against the evilness of that to some degree, is the last thing corporate America wants is a population of content individuals. It's real bad for the economy. Jeff Bezos is not interested in a population of content individuals because content people don't buy stupid shit on Amazon. I don't know about you, but when I'm content, I never buy stupid shit. It's when I'm restless and irritable and cranky and upset, I end up... You ever have that moment where the box comes to the front door and you don't even know what the hell's in it? And then you open it up and you go, oh shit, I actually ordered that? Oops. Right? So you want to be a revolutionary? You want to be like an activist? Be content. That's the most revolutionary thing you can do in the world right now, is to be happy with what you already have. Really. That is going to destroy the bottom line for Walmart and Bezos and all these people, right? Who basically, profit off of a discontent population. And if they profit off a discontent population, what do they want more than anything else? A discontent population that's polarized and divided and angry and outraged and hysterical. A sense of purpose. A reason to get, so it's contentment, purpose, and meaning. Purpose, a reason to get out of bed every day. And purpose is different than meaning. Purpose is very specific. Purpose is like, a lot of times it's nothing epic. It's like, I need to get out of bed in the morning because I got to get the kids to school. I gotta get shit done so I can pick up my son and drive him to his basketball game. Like, that's a lot of purpose in that. That's like a good thing. So purpose is good because it's very specific. It's very action oriented. It's like, I'm going to do this stuff. I'm going to the grocery store so I can cook a healthy, delicious meal for my family later. That's very purposeful. So life is actually full of opportunities for purpose. Meaning, on the other hand, is more subtle. But when we have contentment and purpose, the meaning becomes more natural, and we learn how to pay attention to, we learn how to participate in those things that are meaningful to us. And for most people, it's not epic stuff. It's not, it's not sunshine and rainbows and action, adventure, and romance all the time. It's just like, getting up early enough so that I can have coffee for my wife and make sure that the walk is shoveled to her car and that I can sweep the snow off her car so she can leave without having to do that. Like, that's not epic, but that's a meaningful experience to do things like that for people that we love. None of this stuff is deep or profound, really. The good news is, like, you can just get to it right away. But it's a matter of a lot of times it's a shift in perspective. It's maybe developing a little bit of gratitude and maybe doing some therapy. There's lots of things that we all have to do, but all of this stuff is under your nose 24/7. Yep. You want to say hi real quick? I'm almost done. That's Coyote. Coyote, we're all going to give you an applause. You've made it an hour and 16 minutes without that.